Welcome to the Pathy Foundation Fellowship pre-recorded student info session. My name is Courtney Murdoch, and I'm the program assistant for the Pathy Foundation Fellowship and recently graduated from the Pathy Fellowship as a part of cohort 6 in May 2022. I'll save the rest of my introduction for a little later on, but before we begin, I want to encourage you to register for a live Q&A and to book one-on-one student hours with me after watching this recording. Year over year, the vast majority of selected fellows have met with the program assistant for individualized support in the application process. Doing so makes a big difference in the strength of your application, so please make sure to reach out if you're interested in pursuing this opportunity. I'll include links to register for my one-on-one student hours and the Q&A sessions, as well as my email address in the description of this video, and I look forward to hearing from you. I'm very fortunate to be leading this presentation today, and I wanted to start by acknowledging the territory and the history that our program benefits from and takes place on. If you take a look at this map here, you can see the overlapping territories of diverse Indigenous nations across what many Indigenous peoples call Turtle Island. Mi'kma'ki is the unceded, ancestral, and present lands of the Alnu or Mi'kmaq people. Everyone on this territory lives under the Peace and Friendship Treaty signed in 1760, and this is also Wabanaki Confederacy territory. The Peace and Friendship Treaty does not deal with the surrender of land, but rather continued and guaranteed inherent and agreements between nations. Treaties have been signed on these lands since the point of colonial contact, but Indigenous peoples have existed and tended to these lands in reciprocity since time immemorial. And treaties across Turtle Island were often signed under duress, having been broken by the colonial government and settler populations over the past few centuries through various forms of colonial violence. I wanted to talk a little bit more about this because land acknowledgements have become quite topical, and they're usually treated as a standalone piece that has no real connection to the rest of the presentation, when in fact our institutions and our lives are located and take place on Indigenous territory, and that means a lot to the context that we work and live within. Our training takes place in Mi'kma'ki at the Coady Institute, but our fellowships have also taken place across Turtle Island and the world across many Indigenous territories. It's important for us as a program in youth leadership and community change, firstly, to recognize that the social, environmental, and other issues we work to address are byproducts of colonization, and also to recognize that the approach we take in our work is not the only one. I want to acknowledge and appreciate and respect the many Indigenous ways of knowing and addressing holistic, sustainable, and compassionate life, livelihoods, change, and impact. So, as you may be watching this from different regions, have intentions of applying to work in many different communities, I would encourage everyone to learn about the territories that they're currently on. And to the non-Indigenous folks joining, I encourage us all to reflect on what it means to uphold the treaties signed by our ancestors, to reflect on what it means to be a guest on these lands, to reflect on our responsibilities in contributing to true reconciliation and justice for the mass atrocities that were and still are committed by our settler colonial government. Anti-oppression and decolonization starts from within. And from a program standpoint, we're guided by anti-colonial, anti-racist, and anti-oppressive practices. We continue to strive to create spaces where Indigenous members of our community can thrive and flourish. For anyone who is curious, this map is a really helpful starting place where you can search the Indigenous territory you live on. It can be found at native-land.ca. You're here today because you have a desire and an intention of making change, and that's already a really amazing start. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how the Pathy Foundation Fellowship can support you in that journey. I'll tell you about the program and timeline, our training, our funding, and how to write a strong application. But first, I'd like to tell you a story. I was a few months into community phase during my fellowship, and I had focused a lot of energy on building relationships and spaces of trust. I was working with female identifying youth at a high school in a rural low-income area in Quebec, about an hour outside of Montreal. Up to this point, we had talked about confidence and safety, had identified some important assets and skills to focus on over the course of the year, and regularly discussed the value and importance of having a space for girls to learn, grow, exist, and talk about their daily lived experiences. I was feeling really excited about the progress that had been made and the relationships that had been built so far. But over the course of 48 hours, my excitement came to a screeching halt. One night, we became aware of students mobilizing through Instagram to stage a walkout. They felt unsafe at school due to the behavior of a senior male student and wanted the administration to take action to have him removed from the school. An email was sent to all members of the school community, and staff organized to monitor the protest and keep students safe, whether they opted to participate or not. As the walkout unfolded, I witnessed a number of events that left me deeply uncomfortable. This was further compounded when I spoke to students after the fact who explained to me that they felt unheard, that their safety wasn't being prioritized, and that they now felt they couldn't trust the adults in the school community to look out for them. This was devastating, not just because the way this event unfolded deeply saddened me for students and ran counter to my core values, but also because if students couldn't even feel safe in school, I didn't see how I could possibly help them build beyond their immediate environment and circumstances. The reason I'm telling you this story is because this is the power of the fellowship. Feeling a lot of concern over what I had seen and the conversations I had with students, I reached out to a member of my cohort who is part of what we call a triad, which is a small peer support and focus group. My triad became incredibly close over the course of the fellowship and held regular calls together every second Friday to talk about our initiatives and just to catch up on life in general. This particular member of my triad and I had shared themes in our project, and we were working with a similar youth demographic. So after speaking to her, I was already feeling much better and had actionable steps to move forward. Next, I reached out to my program coordinator because I was struggling with how to approach the situation in a way that wouldn't damage my relationship with any community members. In this call, I was able to talk through the situation and develop a plan on how to speak to the school principal and let them know what I had experienced and propose some options on how to move forward that would benefit the entire school community. If this program isn't already amazing enough, every fellow is also provided with a personal leadership and development coach throughout the year. Unfortunately, I didn't have a coaching call scheduled before I would need to address the situation, but she and I had focused a lot on my ability to show up intentionally and authentically, and I was able to apply that to show up to a difficult conversation with a values-first approach that I was incredibly proud of. To top it off, I knew that I would be able to take care of myself and recharge after addressing the situation, thanks to the self-care practices that I had been working on with her. We really emphasize personal sustainability and self-care as fundamentally important to the experience. And this was probably the first year that I felt like I had the time, the space, and supports to be able to cope through the real challenges and stresses of life. This program also pays for fellows to have access to 2 Coady staff resource people who act as technical supports and advisors on your project. After the initial conversation, I was able to connect with them and get access to connections and resources that would help further promote the safety of students in the school. All of these people helped me to prepare for the next steps in mediation and proactively working to prevent harm. I was able to bring stakeholders together and pave a way forward equipped with the best possible tools and resources at my disposal. I was prepared to support my community because I had the personal and professional supports in place that I needed. I was able to bring forward resources that would reduce harm, prevent violence, teach consent, and help staff understand trauma-informed response and mediation techniques. The cohort member that I mentioned earlier and I facilitated a cross-country collaborative arts-based activity between our 2 groups of participants that centered on promoting the safety of girls and women in our community. I had the privilege of connecting with girls throughout the school and helping them work through and address ongoing concerns that they were facing every day. When the school I was working with shut down because of COVID, when extracurricular activities were banned, when my community partner left suddenly on a stress leave and the school needed me to cover her course load in addition to my initiative work, I always knew that I had an incredible team right beside me. When I was preparing for this info session, I thought to myself that if I just put all of these words down like coaching and cohort, Coady staff mentors, it really doesn't mean that much to you as an applicant. So I thought I would share this story with you because as a result of this story and these support systems and the learning that is ingrained in the fellowship, I was able to remediate challenges and incorporate all of these lessons into my fellowship work. As a result of my project, I have lifelong friendships and relationships. I have a year's worth of practical project management experience. And at the end of my experience, I had made a small tangible impact in a community that I cherish. And that was due to the principles, practices, tools, and resources that I had access to as a Pathy Fellow. So what is the Pathy Foundation Fellowship? It's an intensive 1-year experiential learning, youth leadership, and community-focused program. As a fellow, you're supported in designing and implementing an innovative project in a community you have a meaningful pre-existing connection with. The program emphasizes supported autonomy, so you'll lead a self-directed project with a considerable degree of freedom, but you'll also have, as I described in my story, a rich support network to lean on. These supports are all in part to help enable you to have the most significant and sustainable impact in your community as possible. In order to make that happen, fellows also receive up to $40,000 in funding, which will contribute to your personal living costs, any travel costs associated with your project, as well as startup and operational costs for your project. Pathy follows a non-prescriptive funding model, which is quite unique for funding of this magnitude. As young leaders, you're trusted over decision-making in your project, and that includes managing this budget. You will be required to submit periodic budgeting reports. However, as part of the program, you'll be provided with in-depth project and personal budgeting resources, tools, and support throughout the fellowship. As a fellow, you'll have comprehensive training over the course of the first 3 months of the program before you enter community, where you'll be introduced to some of the leading principles, tools, practices, and philosophies in community development and youth leadership. You'll be introduced to a wide range of topics such as participatory planning and design, monitoring, evaluation, and learning, facilitation techniques, asset mapping, and various other topics which will help you to create a detailed initiative plan. As I mentioned before, you'll also be provided with one-on-one coaching, unlimited access to the program coordinator, Coady staff mentorship, and a peer support network through your cohort and the alumni network. The $40,000 is definitely the shiny part of this program, but the overall value far exceeds the funding that you receive. This is an investment in you as an individual change maker and leader as much as it is into your project and chosen community. Here is a quick look at the program timeline. For starters, applications open and close every year in the fall. This year, applications open on September 6th and close on November 10th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Shortlisted candidates are invited to attend a selection process, which usually occurs in late January in Montreal every year. At selection, you'll take part in some group activities as well as individual interviews. Fellowships are then offered to candidates around early February, and a total of up to 12 fellowships are awarded each year. Your fellowship year officially begins in June, where you'll begin the 3-month training and initiative planning period. As soon as the fellowship begins, it's considered a full-time commitment. The whole year, but especially the training period, is highly intensive and engaging. The structure of the year is laid out to provide optimal support to help you throughout the year and to ensure that your potential as a leader and the potential for your project can be fully realized. In June, you'll join us for 3 to 4 weeks on campus at the Coady International Institute in Antigonish, Nova Scotia, for our Foundations for Community Change participatory training. These first weeks are aimed at creating the foundation for you to explore your personal and professional development goals, preliminary project planning, and to establish rich, dynamic bonds within your cohort. You'll be introduced to and engage with new tools, concepts, and approaches that will help you to solidify the direction of your project and personal learning throughout the year. Then you'll take part in distance-based learning, where you'll go deeper into the planning of your initiative plan during the pre-community planning component. This phase includes additional workshops and modules which are supportive of the creation and design of your project, further peer support structures, and the creation and submission of your initiative plan, which is the document that houses things like your project principles, estimated timeline, theory of change, objectives and outcomes, monitoring, evaluation and learning plan, budget, and personal and professional development goals. Lastly, for the training phase, you'll join us for one final week on campus for the final planning workshop to answer your final questions before entering your community and implementing your project for a 9-month community phase. Throughout your 9 months in community, you'll take part in periodic coaching calls and check-ins with the personal development coach, the program coordinator, your triad, your cohort, and your Coady resource staff members. All, of course, in addition to implementing your amazing initiative. Following your community phase, fellows finish off the year with a week-long debrief on campus where you present on your project and take a look at your next steps. In order to be eligible to apply, you have to be a graduating full-time student from one of our 5 partner universities: McGill, uOttawa, StFX, Queen's, or Bishop. We consider full-time as having completed the majority of your degree with a full course load. You have to be under 30 years of age at the time of the start date of the program, which for this year is June 5th. You have to be a Canadian citizen or permanent resident. You're eligible to apply if the completion of your studies falls within the current fellowship year. For this year, that's any student who has completed their studies after June 6th, 2022, or will have completed their studies prior to June 5th, 2023. If you fall within that window, you're eligible to apply this year. If you have completed your studies prior to June 6th, 2022, then unfortunately you would have been eligible to apply for last year's application cycle and are not eligible for this year's upcoming cohort. If you complete your studies after June 5th, 2023, you'll be eligible to apply for next year's application cycle rather than this year's cycle. We're really not concerned with when you walk across the stage or what your graduation date is. We are concerned with when you have completed your studies. So you have to have completed all of your coursework prior to the commencement of the program date, which is the start of Foundations for Community Change. You can be in any discipline, field, or faculty, but you have to be completing studies at either an undergraduate or a master's level. This also includes postgraduate degrees like a Bachelor of Education or law school. We also accept current certificate and diploma students if they have a minimum of a bachelor's degree. Unfortunately, we do not accept applications from PhD, dental, or medical students. There are a few nuances and exceptions to this, so if you have any questions, it's always best to ask. We really aren't trying to impose barriers where there shouldn't be. There are a few things to keep in mind as you develop your application. The selection committee looks for the three main components to a strong application, or what we refer to as the three-legged stool. The analogy here is that you want all three legs of your stool to be equally as strong. The first is you as a candidate. Do you have a demonstrated and well-articulated capacity and potential to develop and evolve as a leader and agent of change? Do you show a readiness to learn? Do you have strong leadership qualities? And do you have a history of service to others? The second is the strength of your connection to community. Do you have a pre-existing, strong, and meaningful connection to your chosen community anywhere in the world? What does this community mean to you? Why do you want to work with this chosen community? And does the community want to work with you? Third is the strength of your project idea. Your project can be a completely new and independently conceptualized idea, or it can be an existing project that you want to build upon in an innovative way. The key here is that this is not an internship. The selection committee wants to see that you will have a sense of autonomy in leading this project. They look for four main things in a strong project idea. First is the innovative nature. Does it address community priorities in a new, innovative, creative, or entrepreneurial way? Second is feasibility. Can it be done within the time and budgetary constraints of the fellowship? Third is sustainability. What will happen to the project after your time as a fellow? In what ways is it inherently sustainable, or in what ways are you planning towards sustainability? What are the lasting outcomes as a result of your project? Fourth is potential scalability. Is it something that could potentially grow within your community or be replicated elsewhere? And what's the scale of impact? Your project idea does not need to be fully developed at the time of submitting your application, but it should be evident that adequate rigor of thought has gone into your proposed idea. In fact, it's expected and encouraged that your project idea grows and evolves throughout the 3-month training period. The selection committee will be looking to see that you have the core of a strong idea that can be further built upon and refined through the fellowship. They want to see how the fellowship can support you in implementing and building that idea. We get a lot of questions about what kinds of projects are eligible, and the short answer is that your project can be anything related to social, environmental, cultural, or economic change, and any variation of overlap between all of those categories. If your project works to address your community's priorities in an innovative or entrepreneurial way, your project is most likely eligible. It can be really hard to conceptualize what a good Pathy project looks like, so I'll give you a few examples. We now have 63 alumni in our network and 6 current fellows who have or are currently implementing projects across 17 countries. Our program has been running since 2015, and a couple of topics which have been touched on by fellows in the past has ranged anywhere from patient experience medical app development to food sovereignty, to youth land-based resilience programming, to Mi'kmaq cultural revitalization, to youth climate justice and reforestation, to shea butter production and economic development. So really, if you can dream it and develop it, you can apply with it. I've also been using the word community a lot in this session, and so I wanted to clarify what a connection to community means. You can apply to the program with a connection to either a physical or geographic community, so something like your hometown or anywhere else across the country or internationally, or a group of people sharing a characteristic or interest. Your connection can be with an individual, a group, or organization. And if your community is one defined by commonality, you do still have to define where geographically you intend to implement your project. So for example, I define community as female identifying adolescent youth in the Laurentians, or Fatima from our first cohort was working with Somali diaspora and was based in Ottawa. We also have some fellows who identified their community as a specific organization that they were working with. There are some crossovers, of course, and your community is yours to define. Our definition of community is quite broad, so we encourage you to think about how to define your community and how to introduce the nuance of your community in your application. If ever you have any questions about your application, we have a number of resources available to you. First, it's highly recommended that you liaise with your university contact while you work through your application. They're a great point of contact for any updates and are also well-versed in the program and will have really helpful feedback to prepare you for your application and the selection process. We also have a great list of almost comprehensive FAQs on our website. These FAQs will help to answer your more specific or nuanced questions about eligibility, the program, what it's like on campus, and other specifics. We even have consolidated feedback from past application and selection cycles on what made a strong application in the past. So I would highly recommend reading through the FAQs. Also on our website, we have 2 ways for you to look through past projects. You can browse alumni either by their cohort year and name or by the thematic area in which they worked. This section will be particularly helpful for those looking to see what kinds of projects we take on and to help with your project ideation. Finally, as the program assistant, I am always here to answer any questions you may have. As a recent graduate of the program, I'd like to consider myself a wealth of knowledge in all things Pathy, and I am a huge proponent of the program. I've been through it now both as a fellow and now on the operations and administrative side as program assistant. I want you to succeed in this, and I'm also completely removed from the selection process, so I'm a neutral point of contact for you. Our calls and communications are not shared with the selection committee, so you can feel free to bring any questions or concerns my way, and you can rest assured that I will be transparent and candid about the program. I host tons of events and workshops and student hours throughout the year, so please feel free to attend any of those, and also reach out to have a one-on-one. I would love to help support you with your application and help develop your project idea. One of the unique strengths of this fellowship is the support that we give to fellows as they implement their vision of change, and that support starts now. We want to see you put your best foot forward and submit the best, most informed, most representative application that you possibly can. We're not here to try and trip you up or ask trick questions. We want to see the best pool of applicants possible and want to help you get there. So we're here for you throughout this process. That's all from me for today. If you have any questions, please do reach out to me by email or schedule some time for us to talk. I'll switch the slide over quickly to the university contact details, and my details are up here as well. And I'll once again encourage you to take advantage of the resources available to you. Reach out to your university representative, register to attend our live Q&A for application support, and book time to meet with me one-on-one using the links in the description of this video. Thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.